Distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure to welcome you all for this recital organized by the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Turkey to the United Nations and the Consulate General of the Republic of Turkey in New York, to be given by the pianist Ms. Renan Koen on the occasion of the Holocaust Remembrance Day. Taking this opportunity, I would also like to thank Turkish Jewish community in the United States for their generous financial support for this event. Renan Koen, as a pianist, composer, soprano, and music therapist, started her studies in music with the flute in 1979 in Istanbul. She became the first female Turkish member of the Hellenic Society of Music Therapy and Creative Expression Federation. Today, Renan Koen is going to give a piano recital with the expression "Before Sleep," including musical pieces of the composers who continued their compositions in the concentration camps during World War II. Their names are Gideon Klein, Viktor Ullmann, and Bohuslav Martinu. As a part of the Holocaust Remembrance events, on Tuesday, January 28, the artist will repeat the same concert at NYU in collaboration with musicologist Michael Beckerman. She will also play the songs that Jews sang while being sent to Auschwitz from Greece at the ceremony to commemorate the victims of Romaniot and Sephardic at Washington, United States Congress on January 30th. I would like to invite you to a moment of silence to honor the victims of Holocaust. I invite Ambassador Mr. Feridun Sinirlioğlu, Permanent Representative of Turkey to the United Nations, to the stage to make his speech.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends, we have gathered here today to honor the memory of 6 million Jews and millions of others who lost their lives during the Holocaust. On the International Holocaust Remembrance Day, we also honor those who survived this most horrible chapter of human history. Their stories will live with us forever. We will make sure that they are not forgotten by new generations. As we commemorate the victims of the Holocaust, we reaffirm our responsibility to live out the admonition, never forget, never again. As we remember and learn more about the Holocaust, we reaffirm more our duty to fight against racism, discrimination, xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-Islamism, and all other kinds of racism. And we must stay strongly committed to our duty to confront crimes against humanity, wherever, whenever they arise. Dear friends, we must also remember those who did not remain silent against the Holocaust, who did not look away when millions of innocent civilians were persecuted. Among those brave people were many diplomats from scores of nations. I am proud that many righteous Turkish diplomats did not hesitate to risk their lives to save thousands of Jews. Distinguished guests, today we are honored to host Ms. Renan Koen at UN headquarters. Ms. Koen is not only a distinguished performer, an artist, she is also known for her efforts to publish life stories and works of composers who continued to create while being imprisoned in concentration camps. Thank you, Ms. Koen, for joining us today and giving us the opportunity to commemorate this day through your powerful message. I would also like to express my gratitude to the members of Turkish Jewish community in the United States for their valuable support to this event. Dear friends, on this day, and in memory of the millions who perished in the Holocaust, we must ensure that those who lived through this darkness will forever be remembered. And we must put every effort here at the UN and everywhere else so that this most horrible tragedy of human history never, ever happens again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I invite Ms. Renan Koen to make her speech before the recital.
Distinguished guests, I am deeply moved to perform here in the United Nations on this meaningful day. I would sincerely thank dear Turkish Ambassador Feridun Haydi Sinirlioğlu, to dear Consul General of Turkey in New York, Alper Aktaş, Turkish Jewish Society in the United States, and also Turkish Jewish Society in Turkey. Years and years ago, when I learned about the Theresienstadt ghetto and the concentration camp, and that music performance and composition continued even during the time of the internment, I was very surprised, and I was very curious about how the musical composition took place, and how these new works came to life in such a setting. So I started my research for music scores. Although I was able to locate a list of the works without much effort, but it took a long time to get hold of the actual scores. At first, 4 composers caught my attention. These composers, Sigmund Schull, Pavel Haas, Viktor Ullmann, and Gideon Klein. I ordered a few piano and chorus works that they had composed before the war and during their internment in Theresienstadt. I was able to collect these works over the course of a few years. I still remember the day and the mixed feelings I had. I had the honor of when I first held the scores in my hands. And I'm delighted not only because I had the honor of performing for the first time in Turkey, but the work that the 4 composers has written for chorus and the piano in a series of concerts took place in April 2015, but also because these concerts will now reach more people as they are also released CD, DVD, and booklet form. As a musician, when I first took a look at the choral works, I read the texts they used for these works. They were extremely interesting. In March 1939, Nazis started implementing in the Nuremberg laws in Czechoslovakia and banned Jews from performing publicly in consequence of Hitler's final solution plan. As a result, in Prague, just like the other cities where these laws first in force, Jews' cultural life was forced underground. Terezin city was invaded by the Nazis on June 10, 1940. Theresienstadt ghetto and the concentration camp, which would be filled with hundreds of thousands of artists, was established by the Nazis on 24th of November 1941. Thousands of Jews lost their lives in Theresienstadt due to extremely harsh living conditions. More than 50,000 Jews had been sent to the camp. Many Jews lost their lives because of the insufficient food and shelter. Taking medication was strictly prohibited, and the punishment for that was either heavy labor or death. Even in these hard living conditions, some composers have succeeded to live because of the power of creativity. Not long after the transport of the first Jew from Prague to Terezin in November 1941, this underground cultural life also began to develop in Theresienstadt. Consequently, and the result of many factors, the foundation for a rich and multifaceted musical life was laid. For many prisoners, this cultural life embodied the possibility to maintain human and spiritual values. In that sense, and in such an environment, the music of these composers touched me in many ways very deeply. While the Holocaust massacre in Europe continues with all its brutality, some brave Turkish diplomats have saved the lives of many Jews. Today, I will perform the two piano sonatas that Gideon Klein and Victor Ullmann composed in 1943 and 1941, the years of their stay at Theresienstadt. Gideon Klein was born in 1919, studied piano with Professor Ruzena Kurzova, and graduated from the masterclass of Professor Wilhelm Kurz with honors. At the same time, Klein studied philosophy and the musicology at the Charles University in Prague. He also studied composition with Professor Alois Haba. After the German invasion, all Czech colleges and universities were closed down, as a result of which Klein had to take a compulsory break to his education. In December 1941, he was imprisoned in Theresienstadt, and in October 1944 was transferred via Auschwitz to Fürstengrube, where his life ended tragically in January 1945. In addition to the important works Klein continued to compose during his Terezin imprisonment, his efforts and those of Victor Ullmann to organize music nights together. Their perseverance in composition and the essay they wrote they were extremely important to the spirit of solidarity in Theresienstadt, and also keeping the spirit of creativity alive. As a conductor, pianist, composer, and music critic, Victor Ullmann's contributions were particularly exceptional. He had studied music with Arnold Schoenberg student Joseph Polnier. When his professional life as a musician was curtailed by the Nazi policies, he tried to earn a living by traveling from one city to another. Finally, in 1942, he was imprisoned in Theresienstadt. In addition to the works he composed in Theresienstadt, his works also inspired a spirit of solidarity within a segment of the camp population. And he put in a lot of effort into maintaining that spirit. While dealing with friends and colleagues who were often depressed and lethargic, he continued to create and to organize musical nights and to raise spirits. He also continued to write essays and had long philosophical discussions with Gideon Klein, among others. To keep his mind sharp and to encourage critical thought, he writes, quote, "Theresienstadt had never been an obstacle for me. On the contrary, it was a training so I could create a new form in music," end quote. These words clearly explain to us his approach both to musical and to life in general. When I examined the last piano sonata Gideon Klein composed in 1943 and Victor Ullmann's last piano sonata that he composed in 1943 and 44, I realized how both composers were able to find a new musical expression, also supported by the long discussions they had and substantial composition training they received. It is evident that both of these sonatas were composed with this approach. In time, as I was able to appreciate music in greater depth, and as I explored further the meaning of the musical symbols, I understood what Ullmann had meant by a new form, and I was even more fascinated with his music. Ullmann had understood that what created in Theresienstadt would not be passed on the following generations in all its integrity. Through his compositions, he wanted to tell to next generation the whole truth of what happened. as he experienced it. Through the framework of his new form. In fact, it was not only Ullmann, but Gideon Klein, who in a spirit of musical and spiritual solidarity used similar notes or symbols for a certain theme in their works. We can hear the similar products of their long discussion on this new form and the common path they adopted for documenting the atrocities they witnessed in their musical works. Sonata number 7, dedicated to his children, Jean, Max, and Felice, or as Ullmann would like to call it, the sketchbook of Theresienstadt, describes lives in Theresienstadt. At 2016, at the Recovered Voices Symposium, where I was invited by Michael Beckerman and Bob Elias, and conductor James Conlon to perform a lecture concert, I present my findings on Ullmann's and Klein's sonatas. I was able to present that last chapter of Ullmann's sonata, Variations and the Fugue, on a Jewish folk song, from the perspective of my ears and eyes. The fugue part is major. He would like to say, I am here and positively resist with my music. Conductor James Conlon, who came to congratulate me with enthusiasm when my concert was over, and he said, you stumbled on a very real thing. After performing this piece with an orchestra one day, a lady approached me and said, my mother is a Theresienstadt survivor, and Theresienstadt composers put Czech folk songs in their compositions to encrypt the works, and the Nazi officers wouldn't understand them. There is a hidden Czech folk song in this work, and it says, I resist positively, she said to him. The same lady next day wrote down the music of the Czech song and gave it to Sir Conlon. And Sir Conlon, deeply touched by this, brought me this and Ullmann's manuscript as a gift. As for Gideon Klein's sonata, there is full anger and pain. The only reason Klein's sonata survived to this day is that he passed sonata to his survivor sister, Elinshka Kleinova. Like any other musician, I rediscover these works each time I play them. Days would not suffice to discuss the in-depth analysis I have undertaken on these works. Distinguished guests, this true brilliant composer has brought their gift to today. This gift is what I call as positive resistance. I would like finally to put on my music therapist shoes and to briefly discuss the act of creation and the important contributions of creativity to positive resistance. Whenever the human brains learn or create something new, it activates a previously inactive region and expands. As we listen to music, emotions and ideas are perceived through melodies and the rhythms at the same time. And this triggers certain things which are felt bodily. The creative process, where a mixture of several emotions and thoughts are in play, causes the brain to expand remarkably. A composer who also observes the creative process and composes with such an awareness of his creation benefits from it greatly. This person has learned, in a way, to travel through the action of creation without recourse to physically changing actual location. This person has earned the license to use the same creativity in other facets of his or her life. This imbues one with great flexibility. This flexibility earned through one's ability to create brings with it the possibility to face our circumstances and living conditions in complete honesty, in the absence of an expectation of a certain picture or sound that we consciously or unconsciously form in our brains. It not only encourages the possibility, but also forms a new region in our brains that allows us to overcome obstacles by coming up with flexible solutions without instrumentalizing this situation for another issue or making an obstinate, insistent case out of it. This new approach toward life makes us stronger, healthier in every aspect of life, and in our own words makes us positively resistant to life each day. Since 2016, I have been relaying the gifts that the composer have brought to the present day. The workshop I named Positive Resistance Through Holocaust Reality I teach 14 to 7 years old non-Jewish youth at their own schools through use of history and music. After being performed on Ullmann's and Klein's work in Theresienstadt, I created a movement called March of the Music, with which I have been taking young students to Theresienstadt for 2 years. The trip takes place in scope of a festival and also requires the student to create art according to their talents. And for 2 years, I have been making these pieces played and published worldwide. I think that social peace can be achieved through personal peace, which can be achieved by realizing and working on one's own talents. Because talent is one of the main building blocks of contacting with one's own soul. Before performing to these extraordinary works that the composers have heard and made us hear through their own sound words, I would like to express my deep respect and gratitude to these brave composers, people who faced their circumstances in all honesty, continued to claim their ground until their last breath, and most importantly, recreated their lives anew each day, using with their remarkable skills of positive resistance.
Thank you, Ms. Koen.
As a final work of this concert, I would like to perform a solo piano work of remarkable Czech composer Bohuslav Martinu, who witnessed Second World War and also resisted to Nazi Germany's atrocities. The name of this work is The Spring in the Garden, which was composed in 1920. It is a work from his early period and contains 4 sections, containing playful scenes from childhood. The composer, who had experienced World War I before composing, this demonstrates his point of view to war, as if giving advice to children by naming the turkeys, for example. Why shouldn't we play with the soldiers? While I'm performing this work, we will be seeing pictures of children in pre-war Czechoslovakia that I got from United Nations Holocaust Memorial Museum. I sincerely hope that only areas for children will be playgrounds, not the war grounds. May the positive resistance gently grow in their life each day more and more through their talents with hope and love.
Distinguished guests, we would like to thank pianist Ms. Renan Koen for her soulful recital and to you for your company on this special occasion. Now, I would like to invite her once again to give the bouquet of the flowers to her. Ms. Koen, would you kindly come to the stage again? Thank you again for your company.